Lionsgate had a 6-movie story arc mapped out, a full cinematic universe built around teenagers in color-coded armor. The studio's CEO was talking publicly about 5, 6, maybe 7 sequels before the first film even opened. The cast signed 4 picture deals. Dacre Montgomery, who played the Red Ranger, later described it as a Hunger Games-style franchise strategy. Same studio, same ambition. And by the time the dust settled, Power Rangers had grossed $142 million worldwide on a $100 million budget, lost the studio an estimated $74 million when all revenues and expenses were factored in, and killed every sequel plan overnight. The strange part is, audiences didn't hate this movie. It earned an A cinema score. Nearly 3/4 of its opening weekend audience was between 18 and 34. The core fan base showed up. They bought tickets, they liked what they saw, and they told pollsters as much on their way out of the theater. The problem was that almost nobody else came with them. Power Rangers is one of the most recognizable brands in children's entertainment.
Lousy cook!
It's been on television for 30 straight years. Billions in merchandise sold across dozens of countries. Turning that into a successful blockbuster should have been straightforward. The fact that it wasn't tells you a lot about how hard it had become to turn nostalgia into money by 2017. Haim Saban, the man who built the Power Rangers empire, bought the property back from Disney in 2010 for $65 million. Disney had acquired it as part of a massive $5.3 billion deal for Fox Family Worldwide back in 2001, but after nearly a decade of diminishing interest, they weren't doing much with it. Saban saw an opportunity to reclaim the thing that had made him a billionaire. By 2014, he had a partner. Lionsgate pitched Saban on an expensive theatrical reboot that could spawn a franchise. The studio was riding high off the Hunger Games and aggressively hunting for the next big multi-film property. They dated the movie for July 22, 2016, prime summer real estate, and the development machine started turning. Turning slowly, though. Ashley Miller and Zach Stentz, the writing team behind X-Men First Class and Thor, were hired to write the screenplay. Their draft was rejected. Max Landis, the Chronicle writer, came in next and delivered his own version, which he later described as Independence Day meets The Breakfast Club. Lionsgate rejected that one too. The studio wanted something grittier. Landis was vocal about it afterward, and when his script leaked online years later, he confirmed it was real and noted that none of it survived into the final product. Roberto Orci, initially attached as a producer, left to work on Star Trek Beyond. The project went through several more writing teams, Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless, Michelle and Kieran Mulroney, before John Gattens ultimately wrote the shooting script. In April 2015, Dean Israelite signed on to direct. He'd made exactly one feature film, Project Almanac, a found-footage time travel movie that grossed $33 million worldwide. Handing him a $100 million franchise launcher was a gamble, and the kind of gamble Lionsgate kept making during this stretch. Gods of Egypt, The Last Witch Hunter, Mordecai, Child 44, they were swinging big on franchise plays and whiffing over and over.
10, 20, 30, 40.
Filming began in late February 2016 in Vancouver and wrapped that spring. The marketing push, though, was anything but modest. The first trailer hit in October 2016 and pulled over 150 million views in 48 hours. Lionsgate partnered with Krispy Kreme, GameSpot, IGN, Atom Tickets, and dozens of other brands. There was a VR experience at CES in Las Vegas, a mobile game that hit #1 on the App Store, and early promotional screenings in 50 cities. The cast was a mix of unknowns and veterans. Dacre Montgomery, Naomi Scott, R.J. Seiler, Becky G, and Ludi Lin played the 5 Rangers, all relatively fresh faces, none of them selling tickets on name recognition alone. Bryan Cranston and Elizabeth Banks anchored the veteran side as Zordon and Rita Repulsa, with Bill Hader voicing Alpha 5. They brought weight to the project, but whether this movie worked was always going to come down to whether people still cared about Power Rangers enough to show up. And the movie Israelite made was, on purpose, a coming-of-age drama wearing a superhero costume. The Rangers don't morph until deep into the second act. The Zords and Megazord barely appear before the climax. The first half plays more like a teen ensemble piece about 5 misfit kids bonding in detention and discovering alien artifacts in a quarry. One Ranger is on the autism spectrum. Another is grappling with her sexual orientation. The Red Ranger is under house arrest for a drunk driving incident. It was aiming for something closer to Chronicle or The Breakfast Club than Transformers. That ambition was real. Whether the execution matched it is a different conversation.
No.
Power Rangers opened on March 24, 2017, in almost 4,000 theaters. It debuted to 40.3 million, second place, behind the juggernaut second weekend of Beauty and the Beast. That number landed on the high end of tracking projections. By the metrics that matter on a Friday night, it was a decent start. Then, the bottom fell out. The second weekend cratered to 14.5 million, a 64% drop. Week 3 kept sliding. The film was massively front-loaded. It pulled in the existing fan base and almost nobody beyond them. It closed its domestic run at 85.4 million and managed just 57 million internationally, for a worldwide total of 142.3 million. The production budget alone was north of 100 million. Factor in a marketing spend that likely pushed the break-even point past 250 million, and those numbers were brutal. The international performance made things worse. Power Rangers had almost nothing overseas, and even markets like China and Japan, where the franchise has deep roots through Super Sentai, failed to move the needle.
You're just boring!
Most critics landed on the same problem. The film kept pulling in two directions at once, part brooding teen drama, part campy superhero spectacle, and it couldn't quite land as either one. Rotten Tomatoes landed at a 51, Metacritic scored at 44 out of 100. The tonal gap between Elizabeth Banks' chewing scenery as Rita Repulsa and the grounded character work happening around her showed up in review after review. So did the Krispy Kreme product placement, which crossed from aggressive into self-parody. Audiences were kinder. That A cinema score means the people who actually bought tickets walked out satisfied. Fans of the property appreciated what Israelite was trying to do. The broader movie-going public largely stayed home. Israelite himself pointed to the PG-13 rating as a factor. He said that internal market studies showed the film would have drawn significantly more traffic with a PG rating, and that tracks. Power Rangers is, at its core, a children's property. A PG-13 reboot aimed at nostalgic millennials ended up being too mature for the kids who should have been the built-in audience, and too lightweight for the older crowd it was courting.
And hopefully people like the film enough to sort of want a sequel, I guess.
The whole problem with Power Rangers comes back to one thing. They made it for the wrong crowd. Lionsgate and Saban looked at the superhero landscape of 2017 and saw an opening for a grounded, character-driven origin story. They looked at the nostalgia boom and saw a generation of 20-somethings who grew up with Mighty Morphin and might pay to revisit it in a more mature form. Both reads were right. The mistake was assuming those two groups were the same people, and that they were large enough to support a major tentpole. The campiness, the bright colors, the goofy monsters, the simple good versus evil framework. That was what made Power Rangers work for 3 decades. Stripping all of that away and replacing it with teen angst and muted color palettes created something that existing fans found interesting, but that gave new viewers almost no reason to care. A kid seeing this movie in 2017 would have waited an hour to see anyone actually become a Power Ranger. That's a hard sell when Spider-Man Homecoming is 3 months away. The Krispy Kreme situation became a punchline, and deservedly so. Product placement in blockbusters is routine. Nobody blinks at Audi showing up in a Marvel movie. Krispy Kreme and Power Rangers went beyond placement into plot.
Krispy Kreme!
The Zeo crystal, the thing the villain is trying to find, is literally buried underneath a Krispy Kreme. Rita Repulsa walks into one and eats a donut. At some point, it stops being a sponsorship deal and starts actively undercutting the stakes of the movie.
We gotta go to Krispy Kreme, Jason.
Home video sales were strong. Power Rangers debuted at #1 on disc sales charts and held that spot for 2 weeks. Merchandise saw a spike. Lionsgate had hedged their bet through pre-sales, so they weren't on the hook for as much as you'd think.
Krispy Kreme!
The studio walked away bruised. The franchise ambitions were dead, and that was the end of it.
Krispy Kreme.
Krispy Kreme.
Krispy Kreme!
We gotta go to Krispy Kreme.
You Krispy Kreme motherfuckers.
Within months, Saban started letting the trademark for the film's logo lapse. By May 2018, Saban sold the entire Power Rangers property to Hasbro for $522 million in cash and stock. Hasbro announced plans for a sequel, then pivoted to a full reboot, then brought in Jonathan Entwistle to build a connected universe across film and television for Netflix. That fell apart in 2024 after 4 years of development hell. The franchise has since landed at Disney+, with the Percy Jackson showrunners Jonathan Steinberg and Dan Schatz attached to write and produce a new live-action series expected to begin filming in 2026. For the first time in Power Rangers history, the show will be produced entirely without Japanese Super Sentai footage, a clean break from 30 years of tradition. Meanwhile, the 2017 film has quietly picked up something close to a cult following. Fans who go back to it tend to praise the cast chemistry and how earnestly Israelite tried to give these teenagers real depth. R.J. Kyler's performance as Billy, an autistic superhero in a major studio blockbuster, something that was almost unheard of at the time, is routinely cited as a highlight. Dacre Montgomery went on to Stranger Things. Naomi Scott landed Aladdin and Charlie's Angels. The cast was better than the material around them, and the material was more ambitious than the franchise probably needed it to be. The gap between what Power Rangers tried to be and what the market wanted it to be, that's the whole story. A reboot that aged up a children's property and then couldn't figure out how to sell it to either generation. A studio that planned 7 movies before the first one earned a sequel. On paper, every choice had logic behind it. In practice, they produced a film that pleased the people who saw it and failed to convince anyone else to buy a ticket. The 4-picture deal Dacre Montgomery signed became a single film and a cautionary tale. And somewhere, underneath a Krispy Kreme, the Zeo crystal is still waiting.
Krispy